In the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Murad II ascended the throne in 1421 after his father, Mehmed I. His rise came at a time when the empire was recovering from civil war and needed stability more than expansion. Murad was known for his calm temperament and deep sense of order, qualities that allowed him to restore discipline across his domains. Guys, can you help me to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel? And it's my dream. Sorry for interruption, it's humble request. Let's jump into the video. He began his reign by reorganizing the administrative structure of the empire. Corruption had grown during the succession crisis, and Murad focused on tightening royal control over regional governors. He introduced detailed record-keeping and personally reviewed reports from provincial officials, ensuring that tax revenues reached the central treasury without interference. Under his leadership, the empire expanded its influence across the Balkans. Murad preferred negotiation before warfare, but he did not hesitate to use military force when diplomacy failed. His campaigns were calculated, aimed at securing trade routes and fortresses that linked Europe and Asia. Each conquest added stability to his rule and prestige to the Ottoman crown. Murad believed that loyalty to the Sultan was sacred. The palace hierarchy reflected this belief. Every courtier, guard, and advisor served under strict codes of conduct. Even the smallest act of disobedience could be interpreted as disloyalty to the empire. It was during his reign that the palace's methods of quiet punishment began to evolve into a controlled system of internal discipline. His court was an intricate world of ritual and silence. The Sultan rarely raised his voice. Orders were given through gestures, glances, or written decrees. Within the Topkapi Palace, silence was a sign of respect, but it also became a tool of control. Murad valued calmness and composure, believing that authority should not require loudness or cruelty in public. He was deeply religious and followed a daily routine of prayer and reflection. Scholars and imams were often invited to the palace to discuss Islamic law and moral governance. Murad considered justice the foundation of power, yet he interpreted justice through the lens of absolute obedience to the throne. In his view, rebellion or betrayal was not just a crime, it was an insult to divine order. The Sultan's interest in architecture reflected his desire for permanence. During his reign, new mosques, bridges, and baths were built throughout Anatolia and the Balkans. Each structure carried the imperial emblem, serving as a reminder of centralized strength. His engineers developed improved methods of water management, ensuring that the capital remained clean and functional. Murad was cautious in foreign affairs. He understood that alliances shifted rapidly in Europe. Rather than engaging in prolonged wars, he used temporary truces to strengthen his army and train new janissaries. He expanded the elite guard into a disciplined force loyal only to the Sultan. Their training emphasized silence, precision, and obedience, the same qualities that governed the palace itself. Inside the palace walls, Murad created a hierarchy of servants and officials with carefully defined duties. Eunuchs managed communication between the inner chambers and the outside world. The chief eunuch, trusted above all others, served as the Sultan's eyes and ears. The inner sanctum of the palace became a world of whispers and controlled movements. Murad's reign was characterized by efficiency rather than extravagance. He preferred modest garments and disliked open displays of wealth. However, he demanded perfection in the daily functioning of his household. Every object, from a ceremonial sword to a writing pen, had to be placed precisely where it belonged. Disorder was seen as a symptom of weakness. The Sultan's authority extended beyond the palace to the distant provinces. He monitored governors through coded correspondence, expecting prompt and unquestioned execution of orders. Reports of unrest or corruption were dealt with swiftly, often through silent dismissals or disappearances. Yet Murad never announced such punishments publicly. To him, the empire's dignity depended on calmness, not spectacle. His personal advisors included scholars, soldiers, and clerics who represented different strands of Ottoman society. The Sultan listened to their opinions but rarely revealed his own thoughts. Those who worked with him described him as patient but unyielding. He believed that mercy without order could lead to chaos, while discipline without mercy preserved the empire. Murad was also a father and educator. His sons received instruction in languages, military tactics, and governance. He personally observed their lessons, insisting that a ruler must learn restraint before learning command. The palace tutors were instructed to shape princes who valued silence as a form of wisdom. Despite his reputation for restraint, the Sultan was not free from paranoia. As his power grew, so did his awareness of hidden threats within the court. Conspiracies, both real and imagined, surrounded him. Ministers competed for influence, and alliances formed in the shadows of the marble halls. The Sultan responded not with open trials, but with quiet removals. The palace became a symbol of both refinement and fear. Servants learned that mistakes could mean dismissal or disappearance. The Sultan did not need to issue warnings. His calm demeanor was enough to enforce obedience. Silence became the currency of survival in the Ottoman court. Murad's obsession with secrecy extended to military intelligence. He created a network of informants who reported directly to him, bypassing traditional channels. This system allowed him to suppress rebellions before they spread. It also reinforced his belief that silence was the most effective weapon of rule. By the middle of his reign, the Ottoman Empire was both prosperous and tightly controlled. The capital thrived as a hub of trade and culture. Scholars, artisans, and diplomats admired the Sultan's balance of firmness and wisdom. Yet beneath this order lay an invisible mechanism of punishment that ensured obedience without bloodshed in public view. Those who served close to Murad understood that the empire's calm exterior depended on a hidden machinery of control. The Sultan's rule appeared serene, but it rested on strict enforcement of loyalty. It was within this atmosphere that the foundations of the palace's most secret chamber were laid, a place where betrayal met silence. This chamber, known only to a few, reflected the Sultan's philosophy that disloyalty should not disturb the dignity of the court. Justice would be delivered quietly, without public execution or noise. Its name would come to symbolize the empire's most private form of punishment, the Black Room. Within the vast halls of Topkapi Palace, there existed a wing that few dared to mention. It was hidden behind decorative panels and guarded by men who never spoke of their duty. This secret section, later called the Black Room, represented Sultan Murad II's most private method of enforcing order. Its creation was not for public justice, but for the preservation of royal dignity through silence. The chamber was simple in appearance, but carefully designed. Thick stone walls muffled every sound. Candles were placed behind lattice screens to soften the light. The air was kept still by narrow vents that allowed no echo. Every detail of the room served a single purpose: to end a life without chaos or noise. Murad believed that public executions fed rebellion. He preferred punishment that removed disloyalty quietly, leaving no trace of turmoil. This belief led to the rise of the silken justice, a method rooted in royal symbolism. The silk cord, once a mark of luxury, became an instrument of controlled suffocation. It was soft, silent, and devoid of blood. Only the highest-ranking eunuchs were permitted to perform the act. They were chosen for their composure and absolute loyalty to the Sultan. Before entering the chamber, they washed their hands and faces, recited brief prayers, and wrapped their identities in anonymity. Their task was not vengeance, it was obedience. Each execution followed a strict sequence. The condemned was informed of the Sultan's decision through a formal decree. No words of anger were exchanged. Two officials would lead the person through the quiet corridors to the Black Room. Along the way, the flicker of oil lamps revealed no faces, only movement. The sound of footsteps on marble was the last thing the condemned would hear. Inside, the eunuchs stood in silence. One held the silk cord, another presented the written order bearing the imperial seal. The prisoner was instructed to kneel on a small mat. No chains were used. The act was meant to resemble a ritual rather than a punishment. When the cord tightened, the ceremony ended as quietly as it began. Afterward, the eunuchs removed all traces of the event. The body was wrapped in white linen and taken through a hidden passage to the gardens or the Bosporus shore. Burials were simple, names rarely recorded. The empire's chronicles made no mention of those who vanished this way. Murad considered this system both merciful and efficient. He reasoned that a ruler's strength lay not in open cruelty, but in the ability to preserve calm even during death. The Black Room served that purpose, ensuring that royal authority remained unshaken in the eyes of the public. Over time, the chamber's existence became known among high officials, but was never discussed openly. Ministers, viziers, and commanders learned to interpret silence as the ultimate warning. Disappearance replaced public disgrace. The palace corridors, once filled with conversation, became places of measured speech and watchful eyes. The silk cord soon acquired symbolic meaning across the empire. It was woven only in the imperial workshops, dyed in shades of pale gold or ivory. The cords were kept in small chests within the palace armory, guarded as carefully as royal jewels. They represented the Sultan's invisible authority, gentle in texture, absolute in purpose. Foreign diplomats occasionally heard whispers about the Black Room, but could not confirm its existence. Some dismissed it as legend, others saw it as a reflection of Ottoman discipline. The Sultan neither confirmed nor denied the rumors. His silence protected both the truth and the fear that maintained order. The Janissaries, though powerful, respected the boundary of the chamber. Their loyalty depended on the Sultan's image as a calm and just ruler. Murad ensured that none of his soldiers witnessed the punishments directly. They only received new commanders when others retired unexpectedly. This control of perception kept morale intact and prevented unrest. Inside the palace, the chief eunuch became the silent intermediary between the Sultan and the Black Room. His word carried final authority, yet he never spoke of his duties. Records show that he reported directly to Murad each month, delivering sealed notes on internal discipline. The Sultan read them in solitude, making brief notations before burning them. The Black Room also served as a warning to those closest to power. Advisors who manipulated policies for personal gain often disappeared without trial. Murad's court remained outwardly peaceful, but every official knew that a single act of deceit could result in a quiet end. The fear was constant but contained. Among the palace staff, stories of the chamber spread in fragments. Some said it smelled faintly of rose oil, others claimed no sound could be heard once its doors closed. Servants avoided its corridor after dusk, believing that even footsteps near it invited bad fortune. Despite the secrecy, its influence shaped the behavior of everyone who lived within the palace walls. Murad viewed the chamber as a necessary tool of governance, not as cruelty. He saw in it a reflection of divine order, punishment without chaos, correction without humiliation. It was his way of aligning political discipline with religious restraint. He believed that a ruler who avoided public violence ruled more wisely. The Black Room became institutionalized during the later years of his reign. Its use followed written protocol, and new eunuchs were trained in the procedure. This formalization transformed it from an isolated act into a structured part of palace law. Its efficiency impressed future rulers who continued the tradition in their own courts. By the time Murad reached the height of his power, the Black Room had become a hidden symbol of imperial control. Its very secrecy strengthened the throne, ensuring that rebellion never reached the palace gates. No public uprising challenged his authority during this period. The empire appeared calm, its silence maintained by silk and fear. Yet, within this quiet system of control, the seeds of isolation began to grow. The Sultan's reliance on secrecy distanced him from his advisors. Decisions were made by few and questioned by none. The same silence that preserved his rule also concealed truths he no longer heard. The palace remained immaculate, its rituals unchanged, its servants precise. But behind its marble walls, silence had become both the empire's strength and its unseen burden. In the final decade of Sultan Murad II's reign, the empire reached the height of its political control, but began to lose its inner stability. The system of silence that had protected the throne now isolated it. The Sultan, surrounded by obedient servants and fearful advisors, no longer received honest counsel. Every decision he made was met with quiet agreement, never resistance. The Black Room had become an institution. Its use was no longer limited to acts of proven treason. Court officials began to exploit it for personal advantage. A whisper against a rival could end in disappearance. The silk cord, once a tool of royal order, became an instrument of political rivalry. The Sultan was informed of each case, but had grown accustomed to approving punishments without inquiry. Foreign envoys noticed subtle changes in the court's demeanor. The empire remained outwardly strong, but the warmth of diplomacy had cooled. Negotiations took longer, as intermediaries feared delivering any opinion that might contradict the Sultan's will. The stillness that once represented discipline now reflected anxiety. Within the palace, the younger generation of courtiers viewed silence not as respect but as fear. They carried out duties with precision but without loyalty. The Sultan mistook their restraint for devotion. The harmony he believed he had built was, in truth, a structure of hidden resentment. As Murad aged, his reliance on isolation deepened. He withdrew from public audiences and restricted access to his chambers. The Black Room continued to operate, but its purpose shifted from justice to habit. Records suggest that even minor offenses, such as mishandled correspondence or delayed reports, could lead to quiet removal. The empire had become efficient in erasing its own servants. Outside the palace, discontent spread among the provinces. Governors imitated the Sultan's methods, ruling through fear rather than consultation. Local uprisings were crushed swiftly, but without understanding their causes. The same silence that preserved the capital weakened the empire's communication with its people. In his later years, Murad reflected more often on religion and the afterlife. Chroniclers describe him as contemplative, spending long hours in prayer, yet his solitude brought no peace. The stillness that once symbolized control now pressed upon him like a weight. He began to question the value of his methods but found no one brave enough to advise him otherwise. By the time his health began to decline, the palace had become a place of ritual rather than governance. Eunuchs managed correspondence, viziers carried orders, and the Sultan's presence was marked more by tradition than authority. The Black Room remained active until the very end of his reign, its purpose unquestioned, its victims unnamed. When Murad II finally passed away in 1451, the court observed total silence for 3 days. No announcements were made, no ceremonies performed, until his successor was secured on the throne. His death was treated in the same manner as his rule, quiet, controlled, and devoid of public emotion. The new Sultan, Mehmed II, soon dismantled parts of the secret system, but retained the idea of discreet punishment. The Black Room was sealed, though its legacy endured. Within the Ottoman palace, silence continued to be both a virtue and a warning. The silk cords preserved in storage served as reminders of a ruler who sought peace through control and created fear through calm. The empire he left behind remained powerful, yet the traces of that silent discipline lingered in every corridor. The story of the Black Room became part of palace memory, a testament to how authority maintained through quiet force could sustain an empire for a time, but never its truth. Thanks for watching. Thanks for